Okay, today we'll be rebuilding a carburetor on a late 90s, early 2000s Suzuki Quadrunner 500. And what the problem was, the customer was having was the airbox was filling up with fuel, which meant the crankcase was filling up with fuel and venting into the airbox. So more than likely we've got a needle seat issue. Fuel is draining into the carburetor when it should, or fuel is draining into the carburetor and down into the motor when it shouldn't be. So we're gonna rebuild this. We're gonna first of all pull the bowl of the carburetor. That's 4 Phillips screws on the bottom here. And we've got a rebuild kit all ready for us. All right, once we pull these 4 Phillips screws, we'll remove the bowl of the carburetor and we'll make sure that it's clean down in here and make sure there's no debris that can be sucked up into the jets. So next we'll pull the jets. So we've got the main jet here, we've got the pilot jet here, we've got the float here, we've got the needle underneath of that. So we'll go ahead and pull the main jet. Make sure that there's no debris stuck in this main jet. The bowl area is clean on this one, so more than likely we don't have anything stuck in the main jet. The pilot jet has a smaller port, and a lot of times that is where stuff will get stuck because it's so small. You want to be able to look through the pilot jet and the main jet and be able to see daylight when you're holding it up to light. So hold it up, you can take compressed air and blow through it, take carb cleaner, just shoot it through, just to make sure that those are good. We're replacing those, so we actually won't even need to do that on these. So next we're gonna pull this pin to remove the needle and seat. And you can do it a couple different ways. You can take a small pick, push down right here in the center. You want to make sure that you don't break these 2 tabs. They're aluminum tabs and they break very easily. So if it's not coming one way, try another. This way we decided to use side dikes and just kind of pry this pin back and forth and slowly pull it out. So you wouldn't even have to pull it all the way out, but you want to make sure it's far enough to where you can get this float out of there. And you saw that needle fall down. There's your needle and here's your seat. Now to pull the seat, you take a Phillips screwdriver. And this will take a fairly small Phillips screwdriver and remove this Phillips screw. And then you can pull the seat. And it's got O-rings to seal it, so it'll be fairly snug. There's a screen in there that can be damaged. Debris can be stuck down inside of there. So there's your seat. Now we'll take the carb cleaner. In this case we used a Shindy Products carb cleaner. It just has all the parts that we need. We'll just dump those out onto a clean area. And don't get them confused with the old parts. Now we'll take the needle and seat out of here. And that's mainly what we're after. It kind of looks like everything else on this carburetor is in good condition. So we'll take that seat now. Now we'll make sure, and I'm gonna take compressed air and blow this all out before we put the new parts in. You don't want debris stuck down in there. Causing O-rings to leak or fuel to leak into areas that shouldn't. So we'll take this and you can lube it up with fuel. You don't really want to use anything else right now in this carburetor. And all you do is push that down into there. Take your Phillips screw back and put it back. You want to make sure that seat is completely seated so you're not bending it pushing down at an angle. Sometimes they'll have clips that go around them for other models. That kind of just keeps everything flat. And again, you don't have to get it tight. Everything's aluminum, so you want to make sure you don't put too much pressure. We've got the main jet. You want to make sure that they're the proper size. This is a 130, and I'm going to go ahead and check what the stock jet was on there. And they're very small writing. This one's a 130 as well. So we're making sure we're putting the right size jet back in. If you're in a different altitude, they may be a different size. So pilot jet, same thing, very small. This looks like a 55. The jet that we got in the kit is a 55. So we're gonna put that down into the pilot jet area, screw that in. These are brass jets, so they'll strip out very easily. You wanna make sure that they're screwdrivers in there securely before we put any kind of pressure on it. Now we've got the air fuel screw here, and how you adjust that or replace it, you want to go all the way in, count your turns all the way in. So we've got 1, 2, and a quarter. So we got a quarter turn out, 1, 2. Now that's where we're going to leave that one, because we know that needle and seated, or that air fuel screw is good, so we're going to leave that one in place. The other thing that they sent us in this kit was a bowl gasket. This bowl gasket's good with no issues, so we're not going to replace that. Now you want to take that needle that you got, make sure it's the new needle, just stick it in there. If you need to adjust this needle, you can, and you just use this little tab right here to adjust it up or down. Since we replaced it, we won't need to adjust anything. You could actually, if it's not grooved, it's not damaged, you could actually replace it, and might be able to save a couple bucks by not replacing that, but for as cheap as you can get a carb kit for, we just replace them. Now this pin, you want to stick all the way through. You should be able to push it most of the way through with your fingers. Then you want to take and tap that all the way in. It's gonna have to be all the way in for that bowl to fit on there. You don't want to push too hard that it breaks these tabs. You just want to make sure it's good and seated, and then we're ready to go back with the bowl. All four screws back in that bowl, and then we will pull the top cap off of the carburetor, check the diaphragm and the slide, and that'll be it. When you're putting that main jet on, I should have mentioned that, make sure that this brass washer is in there. Otherwise your main jet will be too far in and that'll cause problems. Now when we go to replace this diaphragm or check the diaphragm, I'll show you how when you spray compressed air in this port right here, this diaphragm should go up. If it goes up and sticks, or it doesn't go up at all when you spray into here, you want to replace that diaphragm or that spring. You've got problems elsewhere. So if you spray compressed air into here and this does not go up, then you've got problems. So I'll do a little demonstration here. You watch that slide go up, and that's what it's supposed to look like. If it does not do that, then you want to replace some parts. Now we'll pull this top cover. There's 4 Phillips screws holding this one on, and it is spring loaded. This cap will be spring loaded, and it's not gonna spring out and go flying everywhere, but there is enough pressure to where it'll pop this cap off. And you want to make sure this diaphragm is seated properly. Make sure it's not pinched. When you're going back together, make sure it's not ripped anywhere at all, or that will cause problems when you go to put the carburetor back together and start the 4-wheeler. So I like to always keep pressure on that top cap just to make sure that everything's seated properly until it's time to pull it off. We've got your diaphragm here, we've got your spring, and then you can just take your finger and push up on this. Now when you're going back together with it, you want to make sure, we can look there, there's no rips, no tears. You need to make sure that this diaphragm is seated in the groove. And if you've got fuel on it or carb cleaner on it, it may expand and you won't be able to get it back together. And so you just want to let it sit in the sun, sit in a heated area, and that fuel will evaporate and that diaphragm will go back to its normal size. But when you're going back together, I like to keep pressure on it while I put the screws in and get them completely tightened down. That way that diaphragm doesn't jump out of place. Because if it's pinched at all, you'll have problems. And get the 4 screws back in. And once we get those back in, we'll go over a couple ports on this carburetor, and then we'll put this carburetor back on the four-wheeler and start it up. Once you get them all in, go around and tighten them up. I generally try not to tighten them up until at least 3 of them are in. That way we know that that cap is on there properly. If you can't get a screw out when you're pulling the carburetor apart, you can a lot of times get vice grips on, a small pair of vice grips. Here is your fuel intake. So your fuel inlet is in here. So this comes from the fuel tank, petcock, into this, and that drops down into the carburetor. Okay, here is your choke plunger area. That's your choke. It's a plastic cap for this choke. You want to make sure you get that screwed properly, start it properly, so that you can screw all the way in and not have any problems. Here's your idle adjust. Essentially what that is doing is turning this butterfly just a little bit. So when you adjust your idle, make sure your four-wheeler is completely warmed up. You can adjust it. That's opening that butterfly a little bit farther. So when you hit the throttle, same thing. Hit the throttle and that butterfly opens, allowing more air, pulling more fuel through. So we've got a vent here. Going down, you can see it actually comes out right here. And we've got another vent here. Again, there's your slide, there's your needle. This needle is adjustable. And here's a drain for your carburetor. So if you're draining it for the year, if it's gonna sit all winter, take Phillips screw, flat screwdriver, pull this out, or at least loosen it. Fuel will drain out of here. You wanna make sure there's a tube on here that goes below your engine. We don't wanna drain this on a hot motor. So that is it for the carburetor on a Suzuki 500.